No more fucking around. It's Wild Style Radio. Wild Style Radio.
Stand up and shout.
What is up? Wednesday night, we're at the Salisbury Center in Manassas, Virginia. This is the Stand Up and Shout Rock Show with Wisk and Kev. And I'm in a good mood. How about you?
Absolutely. Happy Wednesday. Obviously, we're in a good mood because we're not wearing black.
We are not wearing black.
This is the first Stand Up and Shout Rock Show where neither of us had a black T-shirt on. Must be spring.
It is spring.
Spring is in
Feels
the air.
like summer.
I don't know what to say about that. Like, that was not planned. I don't think we could have ever planned that.
Nope.
Who would have guessed that, like, there's some
Well, it could have been planned.
it could have been. Right. But it wasn't.
No.
It was
Unplanned.
very organic. That,
I got this new T-shirt, you know. I had to break it out.
It is so you.
Yes.
It, like, speaks volumes to...
I think I'm wearing it to Metallica next week. Gonna pluck some nerves.
Of course you are.
Yeah, it's big couple weeks, a month coming up.
We're packed. Like over the next 7 days specifically. So we have LA Guns tomorrow night.
Yep.
Followed by the M3 Rock Fest, which is a smattering of a lot of good acts.
Yep.
And then we are following that with Metallica this time next week.
First of 2 Metallica shows this month. Yep.
2 this month, but that is just this week.
Right.
I feel like I'm just describing this week.
It is. And yeah, heading back home to Blacksburg.
I know. I love it. So like, because we, in like an age confessional, we were there when the Black Album came out.
Yeah, we were.
And Enter Sandman was released as a song before it was adopted by the stadium.
Yes, long before it was adopted by the stadium.
And there were like metalheads like us. I mean, it wasn't even adopted in the frat houses, right? Like it was just the metalheads that were kind of listening to it first.
It was actually after you guys had already graduated, and I was at a fraternity party, and they started playing Rage Against the Machine.
Stunningly.
I was like, whoa.
I know, right? I know.
Wasn't, well, we won't go there, but.
I mean... As we were in college radio, you specifically were way in college radio. So like the expression was left of dial, you know, when you had the dial, when you had to find a station in a car, you know, using a dial, and the college stations were way to the left, you know, that was way off of the main path of your dial.
Yes.
Rage Against the Machine was left of dial.
They were very much left of dial.
It's a very stunning scene.
When all of that was coming out, nobody was into it. So then when grunge was breaking, finally, suddenly those bands were now super popular.
Yeah.
So to hear that in a frat house at a party on a Friday night was
stunning.
Little absurd, but stunning at the same time.
I remember that for Smells Like Teen Spirit, now that you're bringing that up.
Yep.
You know, like it was the same. Like I was stunned to hear Smells Like Teen Spirit at frat houses.
Well, right. And when that came out, you know, we had that playing in heavy rotation at the radio station, and we had a speaker that we aimed outside the doorway into the media wing.
Yes.
And every time that song came on, people walking up and down the hall are like, turn that fucking shit off. That song sucks. Blah, blah, blah. And then lo and behold, 6-8 months later, you hear about this new band called Nirvana? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yep.
Very cool.
Yeah. So yeah, a little reminiscing, and then a little Metallica. So
well, and then
cool.
we'll be following up with that, right, in like later conversations. So we'll absolutely be talking about a lot of late spring, early summer live music, along with other live music events that we're going to through the summer. So
for sure,
very, very heavy and active May.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But until then, we're going to cut to some news, right?
Yeah, let's hit it,
because we haven't like done that in a while.
No, we've had a lot of interviews, a lot of shows we've been promoting here at the Salisbury Center.
Yeah,
and in general. So we haven't been able to do too much, just kind of rapping about what's going on in the music world.
And a lot has happened. So like here we are.
Yeah,
right, trying to catch up.
Let's do it.
All right,
some heavy happenings.
Heavy happenings as of April 30th. 2025. So the last day of the month, some recent news events that we find fascinating that we want to throw your way. All right, first up.
So I did not know what I was reading when I read this article, but yes, Sammy Hagar,
the Red
Rocker, and Kirk Hammett of Metallica,
right,
are talking about doing a collaboration,
right.
And this will hit kind of home with one of our friends, Mr. Pete Evick.
Yes.
Of the Bret Michaels Band and Evick. Yeah. And the collaboration is a song talking about UFOs.
Yes. Right. Evidently a subject near and dear to both.
Yes.
I know Dave Grohl is an aliens guy. Not that Dave Grohl's going to jump on this collaboration, but like it seems to be a theme in rock. It's not necessarily like a new theme in rock,
right.
But all right. So there's a lot of layers of strange, which is like why I think it's a great story. First, like just talk about the mix.
Yes.
The sound of Kirk Hammett and the sound of Sammy Hagar. And sometimes we compare this, right? Especially when you do super groups, it's like mixing. Oh, I always say my analogy is mixing liquors. Like sometimes you mix some liquors together. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Don't mix the dark and the light.
Exactly. Don't mix the dark and the light. Do you think this one's going to work?
I think it'll be interesting. I don't ever remember it being released, but there was some talk in and around the time that Jason Newsted left Metallica, that Kirk was also working on a project, and he was describing it as very much non-Metallica.
Right.
So, and in seeing interviews and reading articles, his he's got a diverse music taste. His roots and influences go pretty deep. It's not just thrash all the time. Sure. So I think it'll be an interesting mix. Whether it works or not, I don't know, but I'm interested to hear it.
I'm going to assume that it's going to be like with what you're describing with Kirk Hammett changing his sound and willing to change his sound. Not that Metallica doesn't have melody and it's not melodic, but I would certainly say that Sammy Hagar is more, at least not only melodic, but more pop sensible. I wonder if Kirk Hammett is going to go in that direction and make something that's less thrash and more pop friendly. Not to say that it's going to be a pop record, but at least something that has a melodic hook, not only even in the vocals, but in the guitar.
Well, they kind of did that with Load and Reload.
That's true. That's a good point. That's a really good point.
So, yeah, I could see it heading in that direction, and probably at the same time could have some heaviness in it. Yeah. So,
and it could completely fizzle out. Like this could be just something that is a dream, and maybe both parties like the idea enough to even talk about it in the press, and then poof, it just fizzles. We don't hear anything from this. But if it comes out, I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, no, absolutely interested to hear it. What really struck me as super funny was Sammy's quote saying, "I've had multiple encounters with people from other realms."
And there's this
and his brain has been downloaded.
Yes.
So, yeah. It's like, okay.
Right. So we get to hear maybe a little bit more detail of these extraterrestrial encounters.
Yes.
Between the Red Rocker and Kirk Hammett. All right, there we go. All right.
That's Heavy Happening number 1.
Heavy Happening number 2.
It only gets weirder.
This, I know, right? This is like, feels like it's out of a Tarantino movie.
Yep.
All right, so Jillian Schreiner, who is the wife of Scott Schreiner, and if you don't know that name, he's the bassist for Weezer, the band Weezer, was involved recently in the last week in an LA shootout. All right, so like to elaborate a little bit more on that story, evidently 3 persons were running close to the house, as far as my understanding of the story.
Mm-hmm.
They were armed, apparently armed. You could see that as they were holding guns. And Jillian, who was in her early 50s, felt motivated to grab the family gun and come out a shooting.
Yes.
At the 3 that were running by. And I guess this is little beknownst to Scott Schreiner. I think he probably heard the ruckus from what I could put together, a piece together from not only this article, but several articles that we were reading. And, of course, the police were notified that this was all going down. And they, in turn, had to pull the guns on Jillian Schreiner because she had such a good time firing off at the 3 potential trespassers.
Who happened to be police officers.
Yes, exactly. Yes. That she had to be talked off the ledge, a la Quentin Tarantino style.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you see the body camera footage of it?
I did. Yes. Excellent.
Yeah, she was She was firing away.
Feeling the rage. There could have been a Rage Against the Machine soundtrack on that one.
There we go. John's got the video pulled up.
Officers then spot her from a neighboring property. That's when officers say they repeatedly told Schreiner to drop the gun.
We're trying to help you. Put the gun down.
It's with that little fence being the only thing between her and them. It's surprising that someone didn't get shot.
Very, very intense moments there. And security video here shows the moments the shots were fired. Police say Schreiner was shot and also fired her gun before walking right back into her home.
So
the LAPD also released a 911 call from after the shooting.
To me, this is a great song. Like if Rivers Cuomo decides to kind of like sit down and like kind of reflect on this a little bit and come up with something. So who knows? Who knew that Weezer had it in him? To bring it, and it wasn't even necessarily Weezer, but a spouse of Weezer had it in him to like even bring this out.
Don't mess with her.
Bottom line.
Might end up dead.
Right.
What are you guys shocked about? The fact that she went out there to confront a shooting?
Shocked right now. My hair is
yeah. I just think the whole story's shocking. Basically that these guys were on the run from the cops, and I guess they jumped the fence and were running through the yards in the neighborhood, and that she was going out there after them.
I think that typically, like if you picture rock star life, right? You see, if not a mansion, you don't see like a regular neighborhood, right? Like just kind of your regular, like the places we live, John.
With common folk.
Exactly. With common yards and, an 8-foot fence, there in the backyard. And then Weezer is, I wouldn't describe, they're a rock band. They have a heaviness to them. If this was maybe, James Hetfield, maybe even his ex-wife, because he's not married now, but when he, like you get some Metallica rage, right? If his wife would have come out ablazing, maybe that's less shocking, right? But this is Weezer. Weezer's a little bit more passive as a band. They write a little more sweeter songs. I just wouldn't
sing about sweaters.
Say it ain't so.
Yeah, exactly. Say it ain't so. Or if you want to destroy my sweater, but now your girl's out blazing at the cops. Who knew? In like a regular LA neighborhood. That's I think is the shocking part. Who knew they had it in them?
Who knew that they could own guns there?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Right. So yeah. So there you go. Nobody got hurt. They're going to still make records. That's the bottom line.
Yep. Like you said, it's going to be a good song on the next album.
I think it'd be a great song. Absolutely. All right. On to Heavy Happening number 3.
This one.
This is Kevin. This is why you're wearing the shirt.
It is why I'm wearing the shirt, because I'm pretty stoked. And so Megadeth went back in the studio back in February. Was it February? Yeah. No. Yeah, February. So they started tracking. And all the members came in, did their thing, and it was just Dave Mustaine posted this picture of himself on his Facebook site yesterday or the day before.
Very contemplative.
Yes.
It looks very artistic doing those vocals.
And they're tracking vocals for album number 17.
I know, right?
And the article that links off of this, and it's been shared in a couple different places, but I guess he's done a couple of interviews, and he says this is a lot more like the Megadeth of 10 years ago. So now we're talking about classic Megadeth lineup when you think about it. Right. So Menza and Friedman and Junior and Dave.
Yeah.
So, everybody says that though.
Always.
Like, this next album is going to be heavier than anything we've ever done.
Always.
Or, it's going to be back to the kind of how we sounded when we started. And so I find it, exciting, interesting.
Sure.
But the proof will be in the pudding.
Exactly. Yeah. So, they're following. I'm not necessarily surprised that they'd be interested in putting out a new album quickly because of the success of their last album, Sick, the Dead, and the Dying, which is a fantastic album. We love that album.
Yep.
Saw them tour off that album, and it was a fantastic live show. So he was very grateful when we saw him. Like he was even speaking to the crowd towards that because we were in and around the time, I believe it hit number 1.
Yep. It was just about, just I think a couple tracks were out, and I don't think the whole album had been released, but yeah, they did a couple songs off of that when we saw them.
Right. So I'm not surprised, right? You want to ride that wave
for sure,
and I think that he's going to. And of course, like if you're in that artistic zone, you're on a streak. Why break it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Same producer, Chris Rakestraw, I think is his name, that did Dystopia.
Okay.
And The Sick, the Dying, and the Dead. So a little magic created on those most recent 2 albums.
I said The Sick, the Dead, and the Dying. So thank you for correcting that.
It's all good.
All right. Too much coming at me.
All right.
Heavy Happening number 4. All right. So if you missed this, you can go back and find it. We have a YouTube link that's posted in our image here if you're watching and seeing what's there. But you can just YouTube search this, which was Dirty Honey's performance on Jimmy Kimmel Live. I'm going to let you start. I'm going to let you review.
So, we talk a lot about Dirty Honey. Obviously, we're huge fans of the band.
Do you think that Dirty Honey is coming to a level of Kicks on the Stand Up and Shout Rock show where all roads lead to... And we say all roads lead to Kicks, but some of it might go to Dirty Honey.
I think it could be trending way into that direction because at least we love Kicks, but unless something happens magically, there is not going to be any more new Kicks and new shows to talk about. And we've had this conversation, right? We want to not focus, but we like to talk about the new rock acts that are out.
Absolutely.
And these guys are one of the hottest ones. Right. And, to my knowledge, this is their first national TV performance. And I thought they killed it.
They absolutely killed it. They looked slick. They sounded slick. It was a very produced live sound.
Yes.
We've seen them live, not like with a studio broadcast. And
right.
They definitely have more of a raw live sound when we saw them, but it doesn't matter. This is what happens with television, right?
Yep.
Especially when you want to sound good. But of course, they were on point. I would say that everything that happened with Mark LaBelle's vocals was organic, no backing tracks, and you saw the strengths of his vocals. And if you can't get behind that as a great front man,
yep,
you're not gonna find it anywhere else.
And you got the guitar punch. You got John Nato, who's just now we get to hear a little bit of it, which is this is they claim it's a kind of modified version of When I'm Gone because that song is on the new Minecraft soundtrack for the movie.
Promoting Minecraft.
Right.
That's where they
and it has a little bit different sound, but I thought it was a phenomenal performance.
Yep. Yeah. So if you have not caught this and you're new to Dirty Honey, this is a great place to start.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So great news. Kind of shot through that real quick. We have a lot to talk about because another thing that just happened, which is along the line of heavy happenings, is the Rock and Roll Hall of Shame released their inductions several days ago. And of course, we had a big conversations and made predictions. Kevin, you made predictions. I made predictions. John, our producer, started to make predictions, but then he fell back to Grok, which is an AI tool. So we went up against AI, and
guess who won?
Now that I know, we get to see we can reflect on the past conversation and reflect on what has actually happened with the current nominations and just chat that out a little bit more and get some thoughts and feelings on it. By the way, if you ever want to share your thoughts while we're talking, you happen to be watching this live, or even you're watching the recorded version, do it in the comments, man. We'll comment back. We'll fire right back at you.
No doubt.
All right. So, in looking at this, all right. So the first thing I just kind of reflect on, and John's going to throw up an image. I just want to kind of reflect back on how the fans voted. And that's something that we noted on our social media. If you follow us on social media, you're seeing that we're really kind of giving updates to conversations. This is one of the updates that we had. And the big score, according to the general fan vote, and the general fan vote, you can see the tally at the bottom of this image, about 2.5 million, a little more than 2.5 million people voted. And the Fish Heads came out on top. So if you're not familiar with Fish, it's a jam band in light of the Grateful Dead. And those stoners decided to make it happen and just put in a hell of a lot of votes.
Guess what? It didn't matter.
As a spoiler, upcoming spoiler. And second, which to me was surprising about the fan vote, was Bad Company. A lot of votes showed up for that band, which was a little bit surprising to me, but also very cool. And you can kind of really see from the chart that's the rest of that played out. We're not going to overanalyze that, but Fish was number one in the fans' hearts.
The fan vote.
That's the point to that. All right, so let's talk about Kevin's 7. I got a chart up here, and this came from the chalkboard, actually. And as we were doing the odds, we did this in a game of odds maker. What are the odds? Who was going to win what? Kevin had 2 solids. So this is Kevin's 7. So 7 get inducted into the Classic Artist Hall of Fame. There's other categories. I think 13 total get placed in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame under different labels. I don't understand why those different labels exist. I like to go with the true 7. They're just considered time-honored artists by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Kevin had Outkast at 100%, Soundgarden at 100%. You thought for sure those dudes were getting in.
Yeah, well, and when we talked about it, I said, well, look, you already got, Pearl Jam's in, Nirvana's in. We talked a little bit about, Soundgarden was on the Seattle music scene a little in front of those guys.
Yes.
And are generally considered one of the forefathers, along with those bands,
easily,
of the grunge scene.
Chris Cornell's been called the godfather of grunge.
Yeah. So to me, I felt confident that they were going to get in, but I thought they were deserving, and amongst the group of nominees that were part of the fan vote, I just felt you couldn't have those other guys in without these guys, and there was a lot of hope at the same time.
Well, that's it, like betting with your head versus betting with your heart.
Yes.
Yeah. So that raged in me specifically with Soundgarden, but you have a head case there, so to speak. Not in the crazy way, but in a sensible way. You had a head case there for Soundgarden, which I would agree with, but. All right. But then you have also Mariah Carey at a pretty strong 75% and Fish at 50%.
Yep.
You went with, so the Fish 50-50, they can make it, maybe not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think they were leading the fan vote at that time too. So it was going to be an interesting test, to see. Because bands that have won the fan vote, like Judas Priest won the fan vote 2 years in a row, didn't get in.
Right.
So I thought, when Fish wins, maybe for voting.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that's kind of why I went that high on the percentage.
Sure. All right. Then there were my picks, my 7, Wisk's 7. I really committed when I committed, so I got 500% because I knew that 7 were going to get in, right? So I might as well just go ahead with the 5 that I thought were strongly going to get in there. So there's Joe Cocker, Cyndi Lauper, Outkast. I had Mariah Carey at 100%, and I'll tell you why. She is like the pretty songbird. That's the language that I used when we were making our predictions.
Right.
And the Rock and Roll Hall of Shame loves a pretty songbird. They like those clean, beautiful, I want to say like pure pop, although Mariah Carey I would describe as pure pop. But there's some little bits of rock that are in there, so that's enough to justify those picks. So I thought for sure that she was not going to miss. I also know there's an extra push to include women in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So I just saw her as a favorite. And that way I thought the White Stripes are also a darling of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, not only for Jack White, but for Meg White also. So that's why she was up there for me. And then I went also with multicultural. I thought there would be an homage to Manya coming out of Mexico, and bringing in an international act. So I thought that was slightly probable, which was why I gave that the 55%. All right. So this is what actually happened. Oh, wait a minute. We didn't get to Grok. I'm sorry. We've got to get to Grok 7. This is AI, right? So Kevin and I, if you haven't seen, way back, we haven't done this segment in a while. We called it FNAI because FNAI can get things wrong, can get things right, but usually in an egregious way. I thought AI, if you look at their numbers and their predictions, they're very uncommitted. Of those 7 picks, 5 of them are below 70%. Most of them are at 60%. And there's one other at 65%. Oddly enough, Mariah Carey's at 69%. What's up with the Grok throwing 69 at Mariah? What is that doing? But all right, that's that. And then Grok has Oasis as its highest probable. And Oasis, like getting back to, like if we went back to the fan vote, they were last. They're like way down there. Yep. So like how like Grok did this analysis of music interpretation and what would be appreciated by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the fans. It's just AI's not really there. Music interpretation is not a strength of AI.
Well, and I think there was some thought that Oasis was going to get in.
Right.
But
I
thankfully
wouldn't have been
not.
Stunned.
Right.
I wasn't like a fan of that idea, but I wouldn't have been stunned. I'll just go as far as to say that.
Yeah.
All right. So now we get to the inductees. Here we go. More or less, I don't know, a loose alphabetical order. No other order than that. Because either they made it or they didn't. We have Bad Company, Chubby Checker, Joe Cocker, Cyndi Lauper, Outkast, Soundgarden, and the White Stripes. And I'm going to start by saying I was damn close. I'm going to be braggadocious. All right, the one that I was off was Mariah Carey. And you and I both, we were talking about Head and Heart a little bit earlier.
Right.
I think that was a strong head case vote. But our hearts, you and I both were like decrying it because we've seen the Rock and Roll Hall of Shame get so many things wrong so many times that's going to be their asshole move and put the wrong person in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And for me, the amazing surprise, and I got the shot of Chris Cornell like in the slide, was Soundgarden.
Yep.
It was just amazing that Soundgarden made it in. I think that I made a heart choice to not select Soundgarden because I was just going to be disappointed if it didn't happen and heartbroken.
But we both had 5.
We both had 5, exactly, yes.
Yep.
You can be braggadocious too.
I am.
I started with myself being braggadocious, but we did well. We did absolutely did well. 5. And
we did better than Grok.
We did way better than Grok. But I'm gonna
shows AI is not quite there yet.
It's definitely not there yet. Not like again, especially with music interpretation. I will say that I'm going to say that there will be people that I know because I know that we talk about Soundgarden a lot, and that I know that really may not understand that pick, even if they're rock fans.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, especially with Chris Cornell's passing, Soundgarden has faded because there's obviously the first part of that is there's not any live shows coming from the band anymore.
Right.
Other bands, if you look at the big 4 of Seattle grunge, which would be Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, and Pearl Jam, 2 of those bands, Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains, are still touring. So that really supports everything that they're still doing in music.
Right.
And Nirvana, of course, is very iconic, just even in the sense of T-shirts that they sell to teenagers. So, we do this classic thing of like, how many songs do you think that teenager knows when they're walking around in a Nirvana shirt? And it's probably Smells Like Teen Spirit and not much more than that.
Right.
But
which is one more than the Ramones T-shirts they're wearing.
That's very true. Very, very true. But Soundgarden, as you said, really laid the foundation for Seattle grunge and alt rock. And Chris Cornell, as a musician, I don't know what you think about this. Do you think that Soundgarden was inducted for Soundgarden, or do you think that was a little bit of an homage to Chris Cornell and his life's work, which extends beyond Soundgarden in a very amazing way?
So I think it's a little bit of both, and I think it's also the Tom Morello factor.
Then there was that. I'm glad you brought that up. Right, being a voting member.
Correct.
Right.
So, and the time they spent together in Audio Slave.
Correct.
So I think, he's been quoted as saying, we're going to get some of this right now.
Yeah.
When it comes to some of the bands that should be in there. So, that also led a little bit into my push that Soundgarden would get in.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's, I think it's a little bit of all of that.
Yeah. When I talk to the kids now you have, like young adult children, I'm still around teenage kids and, the young adults then also that weren't around for the Soundgarden years. When they think of Chris Cornell, they think of Audio Slave.
Right.
That's been the legacy, surprisingly, of his music. It isn't his solo work. It isn't necessarily Soundgarden. But Soundgarden, at that time, nothing, and you know this, nothing sounded like Soundgarden. I'm thanking you. I'm thanking you now because you brought Soundgarden into my life. You brought that back, from Virginia Tech. Like, you got to listen to this, and it was absolutely life-changing.
Yeah. Well, and the other piece to that whole puzzle, that Seattle puzzle, that a lot of people overlook, and we're very familiar with it because we got into it. It was Mother Love Bone.
Yep.
Because that was, had grunge started to take off and Andrew Wood had passed away, everybody would have been talking about Mother Love Bone.
Absolutely. Right.
So,
which members of that turned into Pearl Jam,
correct.
Basically,
Yeah,
right? So
absolutely.
That's the legacy of Mother Love Bone is Pearl Jam.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mother Love Bone, Green River. Those guys were what ended up becoming Pearl Jam.
Yeah. I love the piece too, like, in terms of just other influences, the thinking of like the Taylor Hawkins legacy, with the Foo Fighters, and they were recently inducted before his passing.
Mm-hmm.
And really Taylor Hawkins gave a really kind of quick speech when he was up there, and he said, you guys really need to bring in 3 acts, and George Michael, Soundgarden, and Jane's Addiction. And, being a rock show, we're not necessarily going to lean too heavily on George Michael.
Right.
But I love that at least 2 of the 3 are in there now, like for Taylor Hawkins and being a Foo Fighters fan, Taylor Hawkins fan. And then Jane's Addiction has been nominated. And this time last year, we were like crying that they weren't inducted. Maybe that was like the lasting effect of that. Like, Jane's didn't get in. Why would Soundgarden get in? In terms of bands that were like wickedly influential on the change of music at that time, on the impact on other bands. That to me is Jane's Addiction, and it is Soundgarden. And those other 3 bands, well, I don't feel like could have had the legacy that they had without the groundwork that Soundgarden put down. So if you're wondering, like, I also feel that when people think of Soundgarden, they go, as the song, they go to Black Hole Sun, which came out very late in Soundgarden's career. So they had several albums, 3 albums out before, full-length albums, and not necessarily just EPs. So there was a lot of music that was recorded and published by Soundgarden before Black Hole Sun came around.
Right.
And I love Black Hole Sun, but it's not one of my most favorite Soundgarden songs. There's a lot of great Soundgarden music back behind that and past albums that was also very influential on other people. So I'm giving my love and diligence to Soundgarden here because I think it's monumental that they got in, and it's a great thing, in terms of the legacy of rock that they got that induction.
Yeah, and I think we'll end up seeing, because the induction ceremony is a big deal, and a lot of people watch it, and probably a lot of people that won't know anything about Soundgarden when they watch it. So I'll be interested to see kind of the resurgence in seeing in Spotify and Apple Music if suddenly their music starts getting more streams because people are like, wow, I didn't to go check this out.
Right. Who do you think, there's really kind of 2 questions here. Do you think the band will reunite for a performance? And if so, who is going to do the Chris Cornell work?
Well, no, who can?
Exactly, right? Right, then there's that. Like, such a powerful, unique, and stylized vocalist.
Right.
How could you attempt to pull something like that off? I think I go back, like, it was like to the Nirvana when, that was iconic with Kurt Cobain and them getting inducted in Kurt Cobain, not being able to be there. And they went with the move of just simply having several different women front Nirvana and doing 3 different Nirvana songs with 3 different women, just to acknowledge the need to acknowledge more women by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and to make that statement.
Well, what struck me, and I was completely, I'm not a huge fan, but I was blown away during the SNL 50th anniversary when Nirvana reformed and Jelly Roll performed. Yeah. And I was like,
it's interesting you're bringing that
wow.
up. It was. Yeah.
So,
we never talked about that. That's a good point.
So, maybe it could be someone like him or, it's
someone that captures that spirit.
Yeah.
Right. And he was very close with Chester Bennington from Linkin Park, which, ended his life too early, as Chris Cornell did also.
Not Jelly Roll, Post Malone.
Post Malone, yes. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
But
I could
it was
see
great.
An artist like that,
right?
Coming in and doing the Chris Cornell parts. I'm excited for it. I hope it's not. What I hated in the Chris Cornell when they did his memorandum and really kind of like an in memory show. I hope it's not Miley Cyrus. Like, please, not let that happen again. And Miley Cyrus did like a sacred song, "Say Hello to Heaven," and Miley Cyrus is Miley Cyrus. Like, the vocals were good enough, they were in key, but she does not capture the spirit of that song.
Nope.
Miley Cyrus or Mariah Carey?
Fronting Soundgarden? I would like light myself on fire and go screaming down the street. Neither. That's worse than a Sophie's Choice. That's even more wicked.
Well, the question is, who closes the show?
That's a great question. We asked that before. And
probably White Stripes.
That's what I was thinking too. I was flirting with the idea of Outkast because that would be a different take.
Mm-hmm.
They certainly have a lot of more recent popularity with their music. I could see that that would be a statement, right? Because there's been a lot of controversy about allowing hip-hop acts into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So I still feel that that's out there, but then it would be a statement. If you want to say that it's here to stay, you have Outkast close.
Right. I also thought it was interesting, because like you mentioned, there's 13 inductees, so you have what they call the performer category.
Right.
But the other categories, so I hate this, right? So the Musical Influence Award. So going in this year under that award.
Why is that different? Why is musical influence different than it being an actual inductee?
Right.
You're
and it's Warren Zevon and Salt and Peppa.
Right.
Who both were on the fan ballot for years.
Right.
And in some cases finished very high up. So this is the same thing as Judas Priest. So why are you backdooring someone in that way?
Right.
When
just induct them.
Yeah.
Just like cut to it and commit.
Yeah. And the other ones kind of make sense. There's the Musical Excellence Award with Throwbell, Nicky Hopkins, Carol Kay.
Mm-hmm.
So, those make sense. And they generally, they're people that, missed their window.
Right.
And probably should have been inducted as performers too.
Right, sure.
But for whatever reason, I just don't quite understand why they do that way.
Right.
Let's just put 13 in and treat them all the same way.
Right. 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 I don't get it either. I mean, obviously. Yeah. So I guess it's really kind of the wrap up. We're never going to get what the Rock and Roll Hall of Shame does. But every once in a blue moon, something like this happens where a band as good as Soundgarden gets in.
Yep.
And we're thrilled to see it because it is an acknowledgement of that music, obviously, that I love and connect to. But that's a very personal thing. It doesn't have to be about that. It is about like what we've described with Aerosmith and the legacy of Aerosmith and being one of the most deserving classic rock bands in terms of their recognition of all time.
Yep.
And sometimes that doesn't happen with them, and that's wrong. I would say the same for Soundgarden, that they really deserve a great amount of recognition for their impact on they were a music influencer.
Sure.
In their time.
Well, and like we've talked about it before, the same has to happen to bands like Iron Maiden.
Yes.
And Megadeth and some Slayer, Anthrax, the other thrash acts.
Right, the big four.
They all deserve to be in.
And we that's the big four of thrash you just mentioned, and really kind of chipping away here at the big four of grunge.
Yep.
So I would, in terms of the big four of grunge, I would make the exact same case for Alice in Chains.
Absolutely.
So like right along those lines.
Yep. I agree.
So there's no question that they're rock acts. You're not going to have that debate.
Right.
Like, I'm going to get away from hip hop, but I'll go to Dolly Parton. Like, is Dolly Parton deserving of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Well, there's no doubt that Soundgarden is.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Very cool. Well, congratulations to that band. I will always love that band, everything that I am, and I worship at the altar of Chris Cornell, as I always like to say. Now we're switching to our last segment of the night. John was worried about the amount of time that we were going to be ranting, but he's now smiling because we're in the back third. All right, so we're going
big weekend
we're finishing up like we talked about the week and everything we're seeing this week, and this is a huge chunk of it. So by the way, if you keep up with our social media, you're going to see some live things I think that you're going to be surprised to see. I'm going to start by saying that.
Let's hope.
We're going to see some.
At least a couple.
You're going to see some stuff from the M3 Rock Festival, possibly from LA Guns tomorrow night, possibly from Blacksburg, that will, kick the Stand Up and Shout Rock Show into another gear. Yes, exactly. It's going to be with the drum roll. Damn. All right, so, but Kevin and I, when we were talking about the M3 Rock Festival, we've been to a lot of M3 Rock Festivals, and so we always talk about it in different ways. We reflect on it in different ways. So I just said to Kevin, just really kind of talk about our momentum going into this, pick 3 memories. And I have no idea what memories you picked. You have no idea well, you might have looked, because I think you did look at the slides I shared with you, but
yes, I know.
You weren't supposed to look.
I wasn't aware I was supposed to make graphics for him either. So.
So that's why you looked. That damn art department. Back to the art
department was going to screw me.
All right. So I'm going to start with yours, because I don't know any of yours. I have not, I'm not like the kid at Christmas that peeked at the present.
Got it.
All
well,
right.
So...
And Kevin's first memory that you want to share, not your first memory of M3, but... And by the way, if you don't know what the M3 Rock Festival is, it's basically a glam metal festival that happens yearly at the beginning of May.
Yep. And it's at Meriwether Post Pavilion, Columbia, Maryland. Mm-hmm. So I was reading an interesting article, I think it was on Reddit or a post or something, that kind of cited the M3 Rock Festival for saving the glam metal. Mm-hmm. Because this is the 16th year of the festival.
Yes.
So what, if my math is right?
There you go.
It's going back to 2009.
Oh, you got it, Kevin.
Woohoo. Communication studies major, not a math major. So
you carried the one.
That's kind of right on the tail end of the grunge era, new metal,
emo.
Okay, yeah.
Emo was out there then?
It was. So, those bands that kind of started to disappear.
Yep.
Because they were no longer of interest to the record labels. They were no longer of interest to MTV. Well, I don't think there were any bands of interest to MTV anymore at that point.
Right.
But, that, and I'm sure there's other Rocklahoma, there's other festivals. But the M3 festival has seemed to consistently have a lot of the same acts.
Yes, it has. That's a good point.
But from those era, that 80s to early 90s era, glam metal, rock, whatever, heavy metal, whatever you want to call the genre. Mm-hmm. And that
some people call it hair metal. Which
metal.
You and I always stay away from, because that was a derogatory term that came around really after really in the grunge era, after the biggest popularity for glam metal. That's what we knew it as, when we were listening to it before really grunge hit big.
But it was, where us oldsters could go to and see these bands. And it happened every year, so it was continual. And now they're getting ready to sell. This is the 16th year of the festival.
I know.
So
it's amazing.
Yeah. So in terms of my memories, if I'm doing them 3, 2, 1, and obviously I hadn't been to as many as you and our buddy Eric has.
Again, these are just 3 random memories, not the best memories.
So what I like most about M3, and so what I'll say my number 3 is, because I did sort of rank them, and I'm going to go to the 2022 lineup.
Okay.
And so on that bill, there were some great bands. A lot of them are there year after year after year, or every other year. But what I love seeing are the bands that don't always come through.
Yeah.
And on that particular bill, and we only went to one of the 2 nights. I think it was only a 2-nighter that year.
Yeah, that was like the coming back out of COVID, right? Everybody was scared to
go
back.
It was the
out to
year after the first show, coming out of COVID.
Yeah.
But it was back to the early May time frame.
Yeah.
And on that bill were 2. Well, I'll say a vocalist as a solo artist, and a band that we loved tremendously in college that never really broke big or got their due. And it was Vane and Tony Harnell. So for me, seeing bands like that.
Do you have a slide? Oh, okay. There you are. I got you.
You
I see
know,
your slide.
and so I was
waiting to see. I was like, where's the reveal?
Yes.
All right.
So that's awesome. The reveal.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Tony Harnell was amazing.
Phenomenal.
He was a great, I mean, not that Vane wasn't. They were amazing too, but
yeah,
like Tony Harnell really kind of struck me in a way that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah. And obviously he was the lead vocalist of TNT back in the 80s. And he just kept these songs
Danish
coming
band?
out. Yep.
Danish band.
Every song that came out, you're like, oh, I forgot they did that tune.
Yes. Yeah.
And he was just ripping it.
Yes. Yeah.
So, there was no backing tracks for sure.
Right.
That dude can still sing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So I like that.
Okay.
So
all right. The first memory I chose, I just literally went back because we've been doing a On the Five segment. So we were talking about, this year is 2025. So we've been talking about 2015, 2005, and so forth. You're right. It only goes back to 2009. So to stay with the On the Fives theme, I just went back to 2015 and I was like, I'm going to jump back to 2015 and see what I remember from M3 from 2015. And so the slide is up with the list of acts that were playing that year. By the way, what was also different about this time is that they did 2 stages, one in the back of the venue away from the main stage and one that was actually the main stage. You went back and forth between 2 stages, which was always to me a lot of fun. I miss that format.
Right.
But they keep everything. They have a rotating stage now. It works well enough, but whatever. But the band Europe headlined this M3, which was really strange to me because there's a lot of great acts that are in front of Europe. And of course, Kix. This is Kix. Everything getting back to Kix was, to me, stealing the show again and again at this time on Friday night.
Right.
Their Friday night headline. And if I look at who was even in front of Kix, which we just had that question posed with an On the Fives in 1985, and it's been very popular on social media, our question of Under Lock and Key or Midnight Dynamite, 2 of those albums that were put out by 2 of these artists in 1985. There's Dokken opening for Kix, and there's Quiet Riot also opening for Kix. Quiet Riot, who had a #1 song.
Yep.
And then we have Europe, and the only thing, if you've never heard Europe, you probably had in a stadium because that one song that they had, the Final Countdown, is the clip that is played at a lot of sports venues over and over and over again. But outside of that, I have to admit that I would even be hard-pressed to name another Europe song. And they just passed on a lot of acts, just as even on Friday, not even on Saturday. So Tom Kiefer had since headlined the M3 Rock Festival, but it was really strange. So I can tell you my experience there. And I know that Europe had just put out an album, a newer album at this time. I know Eddie Trunk was raving about it. I listened to it. To me, it was It wasn't anything amazing. And, this is at the end, towards the end of the festival. We had a good, fun day that day. Dark hits. Europe's playing. And of course, when Europe's playing, you're waiting for the Final Countdown. You know they're going to play that last, but you got to wait out everything else in their show. And we were all just like, fuck it, I can't wait that long. And
let's go.
So just as a memory, sorry if you're a Europe fan, I just couldn't go there. And I mean, that was a mistake to me in terms of the M3 schedules.
Yes, and so Trickster also was in front of Kix.
Yes, yeah.
And they're part of them is Steve Brown's performing with our friend Pete.
Yes, absolutely.
On Friday night.
That's a good point. Yeah.
At the kickoff party.
Sure.
Yeah. So so Kix, and that was always the thing, right? They're the local band that's going to draw the people in.
Right.
For the beginning of the festival.
Right.
And maybe we'll be able to chat with these guys about this, but that seems to now be, that mantle is now being passed to Child's Play.
Yes.
Because this will now be the 3rd year in a row that they've been at M3.
Right.
And
been a great treat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. I love those guys.
And they're still sounding great live. It's been a great treat.
Yeah. So for me, the #2 memory, this goes back to last year, and it was 2 things. Stephen Piercy doing Rat and Roll.
Great. Amazing.
Out of the Cellar. in track order with the exception of, Wanted Man. But, and celebrating the 40th anniversary of that album, which we love, but just when you hear that in that track order, like when you would drop the needle on the vinyl or throw the cassette into the Walkman.
That's my slide, John, but I like it.
I stole it.
Oh, you stole it?
I stole
Put it back
it.
up, John. We'll talk it. We'll stay on it. That was my number 3, but evidently it's going to go to my number 2. I don't have an order, so I can talk about this. Yeah.
But, you're like, God, I forgot that song's on that album.
Right.
So just celebrating that great album. But then obviously we had the opportunity.
You're in trouble. Like I will go to that specific song, like a track that you listen to. If you go back, we talk about how you consume music now.
Yep.
You just like randomize Rat. You're probably not going to hear You're in Trouble. If you listen to Out of the Cellar, you're going to hear it and you're going to love it.
Yeah. Scene of the Crime. I mean, just tons and tons of great tunes.
Right.
And then obviously the other piece, which is why I stole your slide, was, we got to be on the side stage thanks to Pete,
that was great.
Thank you so much.
Right.
To experience that.
It was an amazing experience.
Having worked in radio for as long as I did when I was in school, I got to go to tons of shows, got to meet lots of bands, go backstage, meet and greets and all that, but never experienced a show from the side stage.
Right, especially at Merriweather Post, when you look out on that crowd. Well, the other part to that was that Dee Snider came out and did a few Twisted Sister songs,
which was just killer.
So you got to see the power of I Wanna Rock in front of tens of thousands of people who are singing it. And that is just amazing energy. You don't get that feel, even if you're in the crowd singing in itself, when you're in front of all of that, the energy that comes off of that amount of people singing a song that passionately and having just a great time is just amazing.
Yeah. So that I had that on my list for that reason.
Absolutely. No, I'm with you there too, Kevin. And that's why I threw it there too. I thought that the whole lineup last year was great.
Yep.
And we had a great time. So thank you to Pete for that, because that really did make that show stand out. And Brett Michaels, still a great performer, still a great, very active. And I know, right? Like very energetic performance. You're not going to get a boring show. You're not going to get an Oasis style show where they're just standing in front of the microphone.
He is a front man.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. I'm going to go to my last one then. So I'd like to just throw this out there, like in that vein, is that there was an M3 scheduled for 2020, and like so many things that happened that year, it was canceled. And that's heartbreaking, because there we go. We're going to go back with Kicks. Great Friday night, a lineup that was put out there. I had to go back and with Slaughter in front of them. So looking forward to that. And Tesla then had headlining, and they've headlined several times. But it was really kind of interesting. That lineup, I think, was still coming together. And I think the tribes and tribulations of COVID were still kind of like throwing a curve at it, and it really was put together. By the way, this was when it was a 3-day festival also. So you see Rat and Night Ranger then on Sunday night also.
Well, and and I don't think we were actually going to be at that show because it was the same weekend that Epicenter was supposed to be.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
And we we were going to be at Epicenter
Festival. I forgot about that.
With Metallica doing one of their first no repeat weekends.
Yes, yeah.
So and that never has happened.
Right.
So
this is my way of saying I am very thankful that these festivals are happening.
Right.
That we're not in those times of 5 years ago, and that we can experience these events again.
Right.
It's just a blessing to be there.
And it sounds like we're going to get this, at least for part of the weekend, the same old treatment we've been getting the last few years, where it's supposed to rain on Saturday.
Always.
So you can set your clock by the fact that we're going to get rained on.
It was almost one of my memories that I shared was 2021, where not only did it rain, but it was miserably cold.
Right. Sideways rain in the cold.
Right. Like 40, 50 degrees.
Could have been snow.
Absolutely. I felt like we were in a November tailgate, kind of deal.
Right. So, and so then my last one is the 2021 show.
Okay. Oh, that's where you went.
One of the very first shows I think we went to coming out of COVID. And it had actually got moved to July the 4th. And Night Ranger headline.
Yes, yeah.
Which was, they're always great.
So the cold show was the 2022 show. It was not the 20, because it would not have been that cold.
Oh, no.
But the 4th of July show was nice.
No, it was fantastic. The weather was good. And Night Ranger was killer. And
amazing. Like Night Ranger on the 4th of July. They were born for that holiday.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, changed the track order a little bit. And of course,
bring it home to Rockin' America.
Right.
Yeah.
Which was, kind of, we knew it was going to happen.
Right.
But yeah, they were phenomenal.
And that was coming out of COVID. So you and I got tickets pretty late, and we got them pretty cheap, and we pretty much were able to sit wherever we wanted.
Right.
That was really an open stadium.
Yeah.
So it was very comfortable, that M3.
Yes.
We weren't packed in.
No. There was a lot of social distancing still.
Yeah, as you say, there was no butts to nuts.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Well, with that being said, keep track of social media and the Stand Up and Shout Rock Show over the next week, because we have a lot of opportunities to report from the M3 Rock Festival this weekend, other shows that we're going to from Blacksburg and Metallica, LA Guns down at the Tally-Ho. All of those things are in front of us, and we're going to have as strongest presence that we can have out at those places.
Yeah, I think it's we do have a couple things lined up that are already booked and set. I don't know if we want to share that or keep it a surprise, but we got a lot of irons in the fire too. So hopefully some things come through for us,
right? And
we'll have some great content from these shows we're going to over the next week.
Better stories, good memories, you know what I mean? And if you see us there, say something about the Stand Up and Shout Rock Show, because we might have some swag. If you mention us, just see our faces, because that's what we always like to do too. Like, we always like to connect with everybody while we're out there. So who doesn't want Stand Up and Shout Rock Show swag?
Yeah. And it's a great lineup. David Lee Roth, Accept, Winger, Slaughter, Child's Play, which we mentioned. And then on Sunday night, Piercy and DeMartini.
Can't wait for that.
Headlining it. Yeah. It's going to be so awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we're going to get a heavy dose of Out of the Cellar and Invasion of Your Privacy.
Yep. Can't wait to see it. Yeah.
It's going to be awesome.
I'm big fan of the EP, the Rat EP.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Get a little of that. That would be even better. Some deep tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
All
right.
That's it.
All right. Well, I hope you guys have some good shows lined up too.
See ya.
Did we kiss an hour or what, John?